today's episode of Creative Questions, we have a 10 plus year podcasting vet. He walked so that I could run in this podcasting game. On today's episode, we have Maurice Cherry. He is a designer, strategist, and podcaster located in Atlanta, Georgia. In this episode, we talk about if The Office is actually funny. We spend time reminiscing about pagers, and we talk all things about his podcast, Revision Path. Without further ado, Maurice Cherry. All right, I think we're going. How's it going, Maurice?
It's going, man. How about you?
It is going. It's my son's birthday's this week, so like freelancing and trying to take care. Like yesterday was his actual birthday, so we took yesterday off, and his birthday party's tomorrow. So today I'm trying to get a little work in, but it's just been hectic. How about you?
Oh, nice. Happy birthday
Yeah.
to your son. It's been going. I mean, this is, I think anyone that's been working in the creative field knows that these past couple of years have been pretty rough.
Yeah.
So this year in particular, I mean, to be just completely honest, it's probably like the roughest year of my professional creative life. So I'm taking it day by day at this point.
For sure.
Hour by hour, some days I'm taking it.
For sure. What do you do to get away from that? Like, what do you do for fun to get away from all of that?
Fun. What's that? I play video games. I write a lot. I listen to music. I don't know how much other stuff I can mention within the bounds of legality, but yeah, we'll say that I play video games.
Okay.
I cook. I read. I write. I sleep. It's very basic. It's not. There's nothing crazy going on over here.
But you
Believe
just
me, it's very, very bare bones.
You just make sure you mix that stuff in with the realities of life, right?
Well, I mean, I still try to keep a pretty regimented schedule, even though my schedule now is not like it was like back when I was working and doing stuff, kind of in full force.
Yeah.
So I still try to make sure that like for example, we're recording on a Thursday. For me, Thursday is wash day. So that's when I wash clothes. That's when I wash dishes. This weekend, I'll, wash my sheets or whatever. So like I still try to put some structure into this, free time
For sure.
that I have so far. But yeah, I try to spice it up a little bit,
All right.
give some variety.
Makes sense. Let's go ahead. We're going to jump into the first question to kind of get this going. I feel like a lot of people know Revision Path. And I want to kind of jump into more of Maurice, like who you are kind of thing. So we're going to start with who are your biggest inspirations in life?
Who are my biggest inspirations in life? Gee, that's a great question because I don't find very many people that interesting. Oh, let me walk that back. Let me walk that back. That sounds really sarcastic. Let me walk that back. I don't find, I guess you would say, like the cult of celebrity
For sure.
very interesting. Like I've met, famous people in different professions and stuff, and I think it's good that they have, the tenacity and the drive and the stamina to do particular things. Whether or not I really emulate those qualities myself, I don't know. It just kind of, I think, depends on what it is. I think the people that inspire me the most, it's going to be a broad class. I would say anyone that is still striving within the face of adversity is
Love
somebody
that.
that I look up to, because I think, there are so many things in this, certainly in this time that we're in right now, that are trying to, marginalize us, bring us down in some way. And I think anybody that is still managing to sort of keep hope and keep things going in spite of all that is somebody that I would look up to.
That's dope. I love that. Is there a single person that right now has your eye?
Not really.
Yeah.
I mean, I could say something cliche like my mom.
Yeah.
But like, doesn't everyone's mom in some aspect or parental unit inspire them?
For sure.
I don't know if I would like pinpoint it. Like, first of all, I feel like that's a big burden to put on one
Somebody.
person in that aspect.
Yeah.
But No, I mean just people that I know that are doing great things. Like I said, in spite of adversity, I don't think there's any one person, at least right now, in the time frame that you and I are having this
For
conversation.
sure.
There's no one person that I'm just like, you know, head over heels for in that aspect.
Okay. Dope. Take me back to my next question is where did you get started with creativity? What was your like first step into being creative?
My first step into being creative. Well, I grew up a poor black child in the deep south, um, in South Central Alabama, in Selma, Alabama, where we had no cable, we barely had a mall. So I would say that's kind of where creativity began because I just kind of grew up in very humble beginnings.
Mm-hmm.
Now I wouldn't say like poor, but like it's the country,
For
so
sure.
it's relative. I just grew up in a town that just didn't have a lot of resources. Like I said, didn't really have a mall, didn't have a movie theater, so like that's not stuff I really grew up with. So in terms of just creativity, I would say early on, I know I'd say probably if you want to say a practical application, like an artistic application of creativity,
Mm-hmm.
I would say probably like first grade, kindergarten, first grade. Um, I used to write. I still write, but I wrote a lot as a kid. Um, just like random stories, and I would draw and I would write with the drawings and stuff. And I remember my first grade teacher was just like enamored. She was studying for her PhD at the time, and was just enamored by the fact that I was like drawing and writing in first grade, and like it was coherent. It wasn't just
Grand,
like
yeah.
kid talk or whatever. Um, and so my mom had even saved like all the little stories and things that I had written and drawn from, I'd say probably like first grade through maybe fourth or fifth grade. Probably
Mm-hmm.
she kept all of that stuff. So I would say that's like my first practical application of creativity, and I have them, like I have them now as an adult, so I can like look back and say like this is when I think I first started crafting, I guess. So when I first started sort of crafting the ability to tell stories was then.
That's dope. Like, yeah, I always remember those times where you're just like, you kind of don't know what you're doing, but it was so freeing to be able to kind of have like an outlet to be able to do things and write stories and draw things. So I just remember creativity like being that young was just so freeing. I still feel creativity now is just so freeing compared to kind of what we have to go through on the day to day. But I always find that question interesting because some people don't start there; they start in other places. So it's always really cool.
Well, yeah, I mean everyone's story is different.
For sure.
Everyone's like upbringing and stuff is different. I mean, I know that just from revision path, but
Yeah.
like, but yeah, like when I think of like a practical application, because I remember that is what really spurred me to get interested in doing other things. Like at the time, my mother worked for a college, and she would always bring like scrap, like like scratch paper, like random
Mm-hmm.
legal pads and stuff like that. And I was always writing and drawing on them, and um, I remember I got into origami like super
Mm.
early. Like I think it was maybe like first or second grade. I was really into origami, and just like making paper crafts and stuff like that. And then as I got a little bit older and started to kind of learn about science, I was interested in scientific experiments. I mean, this is the time of like I don't know how old you are, but like this is like the time of like Mr. Wizard. This is I'd say pre Bill Nye,
Okay, I was Bill
pre
Nye. That's where I was Bill Nye.
okay, oh yeah,
Yeah.
like this is like pre Bill Nye, pre Beekman's World. The elder millennials will know what that is. But yeah, like that's sort of where I really got interested in that stuff. Like we had, like I mentioned, we didn't really have much of a mall, but we did have a Radio Shack, and so I was also, especially because I have an older brother, he's 4 years older, and I was interested in electronics because
Mm-hmm.
he was doing stuff with electronics, and so I was playing around with like soldering irons and doing stuff with batteries and things like that. Just and again, keep in mind, it's the country. There's nothing else to do
Yeah.
but like sleep, work, church, school. Like that's it. That's all you can really do. And so I was just getting into a little bit of everything. But I'd say writing definitely like my first sort of practical application that I can go back to now as an adult and say, okay, I did that. You know.
Were you one of those kids? Because I remember when I got my hands on like my first screwdriver. Were you one of those kids that just took things apart and then never put them back together? Because I know that was me and my brother were notorious for that. Like a VCR, we'll take that apart.
Yeah, I take stuff apart and also like put stuff together.
Okay.
My grandfather's a carpenter,
Okay.
and so I also learned like woodworking stuff at an early age. Like when I go over to him, my grandma's house, he has like a shed out in back with all his power tools and stuff. And my grandfather's that's probably I think where I got my like tactile ability to work with stuff because I mean, one, he built the house that my grandparents lived in and my mother grew up in. He built the
Wow.
shed out back that had all his tools and stuff in it. And then he built the desks in our house. He built our entertainment center. So I was always around that kind of like tangible, like practical application of like creating something out of nothing. Because again, it's the country. So that's all you can really do is just
Yeah.
sort of make use of what resources you have that are around you that are available. So I was really into like I took woodshop in seventh grade, but by the time I took woodshop, I was like
I
I
got
already
this.
know about
Yeah.
a bandsaw and a table saw and a hacksaw, and like I know about joinery and all that sort of stuff. So like those were things I was just always around a lot growing up.
Dope. Yeah, that's really cool. I feel like that's always so beneficial. Like those are skills and experiences that I'm sure we always talk like design is creative, but at the end of the day, it's still solving problems. And in that type of work, there's tons of problems and there's tons of things to solve. So I'm sure you've.
Yeah, I mean, I think and I'm painting with a broad brush here, but like I think certainly people that grow up without a lot of resources, and the South is notorious for this.
Yeah.
Sort of has that reputation of just kind of being like you dumb hicks, you yokels out there
Yeah.
don't know like X Y Z. But like you have to be so creative to make something out of nothing. Whether that's cooking, whether that's like I said, woodwork stuff. What I was doing with just writing or whatever, like being able to do it because we didn't have the money or the resources to like get something better or to have something made for us or something like that. uh, Country people are very very ingenious when it comes to making a way out of no way.
Yeah. That's true. Like that's so like there's that's the truth. Like when you're faced with situations like that, when you have nothing, you will come up with things. And that's why like now in life, like I don't have a ton of things, but I kind of like it that way. Like it allows you to again flex that creative. So that's very true. I don't know if we think about it like that though. Like but that just is probably America. Like the American like society, we don't respect having nothing and building from nothing. But that's
No, I think we do, but I think what's happened is that sort of it's been transformed by technology.
mm,
And when I say technology, I mean that's when I say technology, what I mean is computers and the internet.
yeah,
That's what I mean. I mean technology in and of itself is the application of creativity towards something practical or tangible. So
yeah,
like the wheel is technology, the printing press is technology, etc. I do think the culture that has been brought on by the current advent of the internet and computers and such has sort of winnowed away some of those skills and things that we might have known generations prior, like you know how to. And I'm thinking like even simple things like if you have to like change a flat tire or something like that. Now the solution is to download an app or watch a video on YouTube
yeah,
instead of just figuring it out.
for sure. That's true. That is the truth.
I mean, look, I'm guilty of looking up stuff on YouTube too, so I'm not saying I'm above this. Let's just be clear. I'm not saying I'm pulling some divine wisdom here. I'm very much succumbing to that as well.
For sure. But yeah, it has changed. A lot has changed. In the just look at the cell phone, like not having it when I was in what it was like sixth grade to like where we are now is insane. So, I
You had a cell phone in sixth grade?
uh, it was I had it in seventh, yeah, seventh grade.
Okay,
So
okay.
if that dates where my age is,
It does. It does. I was like, oh wow, okay. I think I had a pager in sixth. No, I wanted a pager
Yeah.
in sixth grade. I didn't get my first cell phone until I was a freshman in college when I got my first cell phone. But
Dang. I always wanted a pager
that's
though.
dating
I
myself.
thought a pager was so cool. I was like, dang, that'd be so cool to get like, because it would beep or whatever. But now that I know that you had to
Yeah,
call
I
the
mean,
person back, it just isn't as exciting.
right. Yeah, I mean, like the old school pagers were just like the little one line. It was maybe about the size of, like about this big, like
Yeah.
about the size of maybe like a matchbox or something, a little bit bigger than a matchbox. But then like the two-way pager. Woo! When the two-way pagers came out, I was a freshman in college, and everybody either had a two-way pager or wanted a two-way pager, and MCI was the company that I don't think MCI exists anymore, but they
Yeah.
were the company that were putting them out. Like you do a little flip with the two-way page, man. Let me tell you,
What was
that was
for
what a
our
time.
young people? What was the difference between the original and the two way?
Well, the original pager you could only receive.
Okay.
So if someone, like say someone wants to page you, they would have to pick up a telephone, call your pager number, and then they would have to input a code. And the code could only be numbers, and so that's where like you see things like 07734 means hello, because if you look at the
Mm,
pager upside down it looks like that. So people would maybe page you with their phone number, or they'd page you with codes like 07734, 143 means I love you, 911 means emergency, that kind of thing. And then but you would have to call them back once you got the page. So you would just have this one line display of LEDs, LCDs actually, and you would just call the person back. Two-way pagers introduced a keyboard, and so it was almost like
oh.
instant messaging in a way.
Okay.
So you could still send and receive pages, but it was just from the device. But the device itself only facilitated text communication. Like you still had to get to a phone. So you would have a two-way pager and a phone. The only reason that you would use the two-way pager over the phone is because back then the way the plans were structured, you had very limited text messages nights and weekends. Like there wasn't really unlimited data, so you would have unlimited data maybe on your two-way, but not on your phone because it was
Mm.
just going to be more expensive. So you would still kind of need to have both, or at least be in the proximity of a phone. But the two-way pagers were it back then. I mean, Jay Z rapped about it
Yeah.
and Give It to Me. That's yeah, absolutely.
I don't even remember two way pagers, so it must have like I remember like the original ones, but I do not remember two way pagers. So
Yeah.
like
Well, they came and went pretty quickly because then I forget when Blackberries first came out. I want to say they were like late '90s, early 2000s, and then once Blackberries came out, where you then had like the
full
full QWERTY
keyboard.
keyboard
Yeah.
and it was also a phone.
Yeah.
That sort of switched over. Although at the time it was still in the domain of business, so like a BlackBerry or a Trio, or maybe you had a Palm Pilot or something like that, was still kind of mostly in the realm of business. It hadn't really trickled into
Normal life.
consumer goods in that way, largely because I think the culture around the internet as a tool for communication is not as prevalent as it is now.
For
Like you
sure.
still, and I mean, people still send emails and things like that, but um, those types of devices were really mostly used in a business aspect. Like if you had a BlackBerry, you meant business.
Yeah.
You had that keyboard, you had the little trackball thing in the middle, you meant business. If you had a BlackBerry.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I remember though. I do remember Blackberries being like business, very businessy phones, and everyone who
Mm-hmm.
had it was doing something like that. But I want to move on to my next question. This one's super important. Um, is The Office actually funny to you? Why or why not?
Okay, so this I don't know if this is gonna date me or if it's gonna reveal me as being like a giant square. So I watched the British Office
Okay. Yeah.
with Ricky Gervais,
Hmm.
Martin Freeman. I've seen that one. I have not seen a single episode of American Office. I've seen memes about it, so I kind of like understand it from
Yeah.
you know Jim and Pam have a romance.
Yeah.
Dwight's the annoying coworker. Michael Scott is the annoying boss. Like I get that. Never seen an episode. So I can't
I
really
didn't
say
expect
whether or
that
not it's
answer.
funny. I would assume that it's funny
Okay.
because it's still in the general sort of like,
Zeitgeist.
like
Yeah.
internet
Yep.
zeitgeist. And people know about The Office. I mean, I don't think. I mean, that was a vehicle. It was sort of a vehicle for Steve Carell, but
Mhm.
Steve Carell was also looped in with Judd Apatow and that whole crew. But
Yep.
like John Krasinski, Rainn Wilson, etc. They all sort of came up through that show. But yeah, never seen an episode. Not
Dang.
again, not of the U.S.
Yeah.
Office. I've seen the British Office. Haven't seen the U.S.
So
Office.
there's never been like an itch to want to go like check it out. Nothing. That's fair.
Nah. It'll be there when I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
It ain't going nowhere.
It's not going anywhere.
It's not going anywhere. It'll be there when I'm ready for it. So
Yeah.
I'm in no rush to watch it.
Dope. Is there any other show like that that's like your favorite?
I don't think I have a favorite show.
Okay.
Cause I watch a lot of stuff. I don't necessarily watch it sometimes when it's airing.
Yeah.
Um, I'll catch stuff later because sometimes I don't really like to watch stuff when everybody else is watching it because it feels like there's just too much chatter around
For
it.
sure.
And that to me can influence whether or not I actually like it. Like, do I like it because I like it, or do I like it because everyone else likes it?
Yeah.
And by the transitive property of peer pressure, I now like it. Um, so like right now, I'm trying to think, what am I really watching right now? I don't think anybody's really watching nothing right now because the writers just came off strike. So people are just sort of waiting
Yeah.
for
I just been watching
new stuff to
trashy reality TV. That's pretty much all you got right now.
happen. Of the day that we are recording this, I am going to watch Lupin on Netflix.
I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard about that.
So part 3 just came out today, so I want to watch that.
Okay.
Trying to think, what else am I really watching? I don't watch a lot of television.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually just recently canceled all of my streaming services, so I don't really watch. Like I have a network server at home that has a ton of stuff on it.
For sure.
So I do still watch movies and TV shows and things of that nature. I guess I can mention this because it is starting right now. Great British Bake Off.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I do watch that. The 14th cycle is currently going on right now. So episode 2 just came out this week that we're recording.
Yeah.
Biscuit Week. So it's a good show. So I watch that. But I watch a lot of random stuff at different times. So like I don't know if there's anything really particular
For
right
sure.
now that's appointment television. Now ask me in a few months, it'll most likely be Abbott Elementary.
Yo,
I'm sure
love Abbott.
when it comes back,
Yeah.
I'll watch that. I do want to watch this new series that just premiered this week on NBC called Found.
Mm.
I do want to watch that. And I'm trying to think what else. You mentioned like trashy reality stuff. Next week there's going to be this reality show that airs called House of Villains that I want to watch because it's got Omarosa is on there and Tiffany New York Pollard.
What?
And Tanisha from Bad Girls and like a bunch of other like reality show villains in one house. So I would like to see what that's going to be about.
Yeah.
But I like to catch stuff here and there, when it happens. So there's nothing in particular right now that I'm really just like. Well, if I have to give any show, like if like everyone has a comfort show, right?
Yeah.
I'd say my comfort show is always going to be The Simpsons.
Okay.
Like
okay.
early season Simpsons, like seasons 4 through 6, maybe 4 through 7, are always going to be like my go-to. Like if you want a good idea of what my like sense of humor is, it's like The Simpsons from seasons 4 to 7 is pretty
That's
much
you?
it.
Yeah.
It's like that's pretty much me. Yeah. So like I'll always watch that. I'll always be into that. So I tend to come back to that a lot. Like if there's nothing else on that I feel like watching, I'll watch that.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Me and my wife are watching, I don't know if you've heard of this, but we're watching Love Island, the British version from like, they have like 10 seasons, but it's just this ridiculous, most reality dating shows that are on TV now, I feel like this show was the blueprint for them. So we wanted to kind of go back and see what that was, and it is wild. Like it's a wild show. But that's just
Is that
like
on Netflix or something?
it's on Hulu. They have all the seasons on Hulu. But that's just something we wanted to kind of go back and watch. But like now everything is kind of back. We've been watching Shark Tank, Gordon Ramsay has Hell's Kitchen back. He has Kitchen Nightmares came back.
Hmm.
Survivor, Amazing Race, like all of these are like the shows that are like appointment TV for us, but all of them came back at the same time, so we're like, we're booked, we're good for a little while.
Well, like I mean, with the writers having been on strike for the past 5 months, and then of course actors have joined in on
Yeah,
that. SAG-AFTRA joined in on that. I feel like there has been a surge in reality programming
yes,
because they
that's
can just spin it up super quickly. You know.
yep. That's what I figured, and I was like, well, we'll take advantage of this. Um, okay, so I want to move into talking about revision path. This is your 10 year this year, right?
Hmm.
So I wanted to kind of talk about the inception. So my next question is, what made you start revision path?
So Revision Path really grew out of a project that I started back in 2005 called the Black Weblog Awards, and I started that because I was an active blogger back then. I knew friends of mine that were active bloggers and designers as well, but we just weren't getting any sort of recognition in the general sort of internet zeitgeist about the work that we were doing. Blogging itself was taking off. Like blogging, if you go back to 2005, blogging was big. Like people had a blog spot or they
Mm-hmm.
had a movable type. This is pre WordPress. Like they had these things. They might have been on B2, which was the thing before WordPress. So they might have been on some type of a content management system or something, and it was just a lot of people writing about whatever. Live Journal, for example. A lot of people were doing that kind of stuff. Um, and there were awards events that sort of celebrated it, but I never saw that any of them had like black nominees, let alone black winners. And so I had felt compelled to start something because aside from just regular blogging, people were also starting to get into video.
Mm-hmm.
People were starting to get into audio. This is pre the Word podcast, I would say. People just called it audio blogging back
Oh
then.
wow.
But there was a lot of this stuff that was sort of happening, but there wasn't really recognition about it, especially not for what black people were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just was like, oh, I'm going to start this event to recognize and celebrate what black folks are doing online. And the first year, it might have been the second year that I introduced this. Yeah, the second year, which was 2006, I introduced a best blog design category because one of the great things with a lot of these blogs is that they were basically just a blank shell.
Mm.
There might have been templates that came with it. I mean, this is back when table-based layouts in web design were being replaced by CSS, which separated content from presentation. And so these content management systems would just output basic, HTML code or whatever. But there were some really talented designers that knew how to build around all of that, and so I wanted to showcase that. And I really liked because I was a working designer at the time. I was working for the state of Georgia. Then I left there and went to AT&T to work as a junior designer. And I knew other friends of mine, other colleagues that were doing great work that just weren't getting recognized. And I wanted to do something then that probably would have been like the inception of Revision Path,
Mm-hmm.
but I was working full time. I was also in graduate school full time, and I was doing the side project of the Black Weblog Award. So I just didn't have the capacity to take it on. Fast forward let's see, that was 2006. Fast forward 7 years. By this time, I've left AT&T. I've started my own studio, and I've now been in business for 5 years. I've also sold the Black Weblog Awards in this 7 year
Oh wow.
period. So by that time, I kind of was itching for some sort of new project to do. And I revisited that idea of doing something around design because at this point in time, especially since I was a working designer and a studio owner, I was looking at design media and design organizations, which I hadn't really paid attention to prior to that. Like I've been a working designer since probably like, if we're talking freelance, since 99.
Okay.
And then if we're talking professionally with a company since 2005. So by this time I had been in the design like space. I had done web design. I knew HTML, I knew CSS, Photoshop, Dreamweaver, CSS, all that stuff. Um, but hadn't really looked for community around
Mm-hmm.
that. because the jobs that I were at, for example, just when I worked for the state of Georgia, I think I was the only designer there, and so there was nobody else that I really
Yeah.
could talk with about that. And then when I worked at AT&T, there were other designers there. Like I was on a team with a lot of, I think there were like 30 designers on our team, most of which were black, which is kind of rare, I think. When I think that's because of when I talk to folks for the show, they're always like, I'm the only black person on my team, etc. I was fortunate, and maybe because I'm in Atlanta, that there were a lot of black designers on the team that I worked on. Um, and so I just felt like there was something I could do to showcase the sort of work and things that we were doing, and I wanted to be in community with other designers. So I sought out, you know, print magazine and communication arts and AIGA, etc. And I was not seeing anyone that looked like me kind of reflected back at me,
Mm-hmm.
um, which made me wonder, like, is this a possible or attainable thing? And I knew that it was because I had friends and peers of mine that were in New York and in California that were doing great work and just weren't getting recognized for it. And so that's how sort of all of that kind of came together to form the like fertile soil from which Revision Path sort of sprouted out from. And so in 2013, I started that. Started it as an online magazine for the first year, and then I'd say roughly about halfway through the first year, the first guest on the podcast, Raquel Rodriguez from Chicago, sort of gave me the idea to do it as a podcast, but I just didn't have the tools and the setup to
For
really make it
sure.
happen. And then it wasn't until March of 2014 that I finally decided to kind of just shift from trying to be an online magazine, because that was really a thing at the time, is online magazines. I shifted from that into podcasting, and then it's just kind of went from there.
That's dope. That's really like you're like the black podfather. Like you like
No, I don't know if I'd say all
in the
that.
design space you are though. Like there's nobody else who has 10 years in the game when it comes to this. So I just wanted to pay my respect to that and like appreciate.
You say pay my respects like I done passed on.
No, no, no,
Like,
no.
Is this my memorial?
I just mean I feel like we don't give people their flowers while they're like doing the thing that we appreciate. So I try in my life to give people, hey man, I really think that's dope. Like just take time out of my day to tell people when they're doing things that are dope. And I appreciate the work that you're
Yeah.
doing because it lets other people know that this is a possibility. Like it's something that you can kind of go do when you see someone who looks like you go do it. So that's what that
Thank you.
means.
Thank you.
It's not
Here lies Maurice Cherry. No, thank you. I appreciate that. I do. I'm pulling your chain. No,
Yeah.
thank you. I do. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I've been doing it for a long time, and I mean, to be clear, there were other Black design podcasters back then.
For
I
sure.
don't think they've continued it.
yeah.
Also, between you and me, they kind of didn't want people to know they were Black,
Eh,
but that's a whole other issue if you want to get into that about the optics.
Yeah.
But there certainly were some that were kind of starting out in the space, but just really concealed themselves
For sure.
in such a way where the assumption was that the default was white,
Mm-hmm.
but they weren't white.
And isn't Revision Path one of the only podcasts, or in aren't you associated with the Smithsonian in some way?
Yeah, it is. It is the only podcast.
Okay, that's what I thought.
That is part of the Smithsonian Institute's permanent archives. One for the National Museum of African American History and Culture,
For sure.
but also across the entire Smithsonian Institute. So all of their museums.
Yeah.
So we're the first, which is, and I had to when the acquisition happened, I had to really ask them, like, can you run it by your internal affairs? Because I just want to make sure that when I say this, that it's right.
Yeah.
I don't want to be going out telling people one thing and then the Smithsonian tries to check me like, well, actually, but they were like, no, you're the first. So yeah, we are the first podcast in all of the Smithsonian, but it's attributed to the National Museum of African American History and Culture because that's the curation team that I worked with.
That's dope. That's so cool. Yeah, again, congrats on all that. My next question is, when you look back on the 10 years, what are you the most proud of?
I'm the most proud of the fact that it's been able to showcase a plethora of black creativity across not just the design industry, but the tech industry as well. Not just here in the U.S., but like all over the world. I mean, I feel really fortunate to have been able to talk to people on 6 out of 7 continents. No one in Antarctica. If there's a black designer in Antarctica that might be listening to this, hit me up. Uh, but I feel really fortunate to be able to have this platform to allow other people to shine,
Yeah.
to let other folks know, like, hey, this is the work that you're doing, to give them recognition. Because just like you said before, a lot of people don't get that. They don't get those flowers. And I can tell you from when I've interviewed folks for the show, I'm often their first interview that they've ever had.
Wow.
Like no one has talked to them about their work outside of, say, an employment context, like a job interview. So I'm just fortunate to be able to provide this platform that will allow people to see the diversity that exists in design and tech on what could be perceived as a monolithic set.
Yes.
When people go to the archive page for Revision Path, I have on purpose a long ass page of every single person that I've interviewed. I do that on purpose because I want people to see, like, this is what you're missing. Yeah, I could have it where they could tab over page by page, and I've thought about that in the past, but I was like, no, I want people to see every single person on one page so you see the volume of the work, one, but two, that you see we come in all shapes, sizes, colors,
Yep.
you know, geographic locations, sexual orientations, gender representations and expressions, etc. Like, black design is out there, black tech is out there, and I feel really fortunate that Revision Path is that platform that they're allowed to shine.
That's fire. That's really dope. And my next question is, do you have any plans for Revision Path going forward? Is there anything exciting that you're working on or anything like that?
Well, what's that saying about we make plans and God laughs?
Yeah.
Have you heard that saying before?
I have never heard that saying before.
Okay. I have plans. I always have plans for
Gotcha.
Revision Path. Plans, however, are only able to be carried out based on the resources that are available.
For sure.
So, I mean, look, I've got pitch decks that will build Revision Path out to like a multimedia network with multiple shows, branching into video, doing more editorial stuff like we used to do in the past. So I have plans for all of that. Do I have the resources for all of that? No. I have the resources for the podcast.
For sure.
And I'm hoping to get more resources to sort of keep that going, especially, 10 years is a long time to do a podcast. And in our current economy, nothing is getting cheaper.
Yeah, that's so true.
And I'd say also just in our general culture, there's started to be, especially in the quote unquote DEI space, there's been such a lack of interest and resources than what used to exist, even just like 3 or 4 years ago. So every year it becomes harder to keep Revision Path going. I'm always, sort of doing calls for donations on the podcast, on our social media, etc., to keep it going, because it's not easy to keep it going.
For sure.
It ain't free to keep it going either. So, do I have plans? Yes. I have big plans. I would love to do multiple podcasts, web series. I'd love to bring back our literary anthology, recognize things of that nature. But, it just depends on the resources, which right now, just based, like I said, on the current climate, I don't have. So if there's anyone that's listening that would like to invest in a 10-year-old media company that's doing great things for black people,
Yes.
let me know. The doors of the church are open. It'll be like altar call. You can just come right on down. It's all good. Just let me know.
Yeah, and again, it's important to exist. So I'll put your donation link in the bio, like when I put everything together, because this is
Okay.
something that we need to have. I've also seen, like, I don't know if you know Terrence from AAGD. They're kind of running into the same thing where it's just like harder to keep these things that support black designers and black people around because things are just getting more expensive. And it's like sad to see that that is our existence, where it's like these things are important and we need them, but we can't keep them around because they cost. So
Yeah, and I mean, and I don't want to set it up as like we're operating from a deficit. So
no,
I want
no,
to be
for
clear
sure,
about
for
that.
sure.
Like in terms of like the podcast itself, like I have, and people that have been on the show that know this, I have like lists of like thousands of people that I could have on the
For
show.
sure.
I'm very fortunate in the 10 years I've done this show to have like standing contacts at all the major tech companies
Mm-hmm.
that I can reach out to, all the major design studios that I can reach out to. Um, so for that, I think is a good thing. But like I said, just to still have the resources to be able to put it on
Yeah,
is tough.
it
It's
is.
it's really tough. I mean, I think you can see right now, like everyone is trying to move towards a subscription based something, or they're
Everybody.
asking,
Yeah.
um, and that's unfortunately just the time that we're living in right now. And
Yeah.
so, um, I think I think a lot about John H. Johnson, who's the founder of Johnson Publishing Company.
Mm.
His wife, Eunice W. Johnson, who's the creator of Fashion Fair, is from Marion, Alabama. My grandmother's from Marion, Alabama. They actually went to school together. And so I'm not saying this to say like I have like an in with the Johnson family. I say this to say that I've had like kind of a front seat to see how he was able to build a lot of that stuff and do it in service of the community.
Mm.
And what I think can sometimes happen is that the community can take advantage of the fact that it exists, and won't support it because they're like, oh well, it's
It's gonna
there.
be here
And
forever.
sometimes
Yeah.
and sometimes what can happen, and I mean I think we see this with other black media, is that they may have to change in some aspect to try to find what's going to appeal to funders.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, we'll put Ebony Magazine, for example. Ebony Magazine in the 60s was very much like a very conscious magazine. It was mostly like a political magazine. But then, like in the 80s and 90s, it really switched more towards entertainment. It was more so focused on Hollywood. It became less of, sort of this political magazine and became more of like I don't want to say like a celebrity rag, but like it sort of became like a People or something like that. But it's had to do that in order to
Stay relevant.
one, stay relevant, but
Yeah.
also like to attract the attention to get the funding to be able to keep going. I
Yeah.
mean, there's old issues of Ebony that you can go back and look at online where like Langston Hughes is in there doing an ad for
Wow.
like Smirnoff or something like that. But then you look at later issues of Ebony and like you see a lot of stuff for Ford and for other like big brands and stuff like that. Even just looking at the way that the advertising has sort of changed in that magazine in particular,
Yeah.
dictates kind of how media, particularly black media, really has to shapeshift a lot, but still try to hold on to its central tenet. And it's tough to do with, like I said, a rapidly changing culture,
Mm-hmm.
with the economy changing. There's just a lot of factors that can make it difficult to stay true to your mission
For sure.
and also keep the lights on.
For sure. Yeah. That makes absolute sense. All right. I always ask the podcast is called Creative Questions, so my last question always has to do with that. So
Okay.
what does creativity mean to you?
To me, creativity is really making a way out of no way.
Love that.
Um, and I say that because, as I sort of alluded to earlier,
Mm-hmm.
with just how like if you come from a background where you didn't have a lot of resources, you have to sort of make do, like that sort of ingenuity.
For sure.
These are all applications of creativity that I think maybe modern designers may not see it as such because it's not inherently visual slash digital. Like it's not
Mm-hmm.
a Figma file, or it's not a slick movie trailer or something like that. But a lot of the things that maybe even we have grown up with culturally as Black people in America, um, are applications of creativity that I think we just kind of take for granted. Like these things didn't come out of a vacuum.
For sure.
I mean, think of something as simple as like hair care. You know, being able to take care of this is a creative application. I don't. I did not wake up with it looking like this. Trust me. Um, but it's like, who knew that you would have to like use water and oil to
For
loosen
sure.
it up, and who knew that you would have to use a pick? The pick probably didn't even exist,
Hmm.
so they had to make a tool to be able to manage and style the hair so it would be in a I wouldn't necessarily say a presentable fashion, but like so it's in a fashion that you can sort of work
Yeah.
with in a way,
Or you like,
Um,
or you want to wear. Like, yeah,
right, exactly. Um, and so creativity is just really sort of making a way out of no way, like seeing a problem and coming up with a solution for it in some capacity is creativity. Whether that's um, again, whether that's sort of a visual sort of thing or whether it's something that's more tactile, all of that to me is creativity. Like creativity is a very broad sort of field or a broad sort of topic.
yeah.
And I don't think it should just be restricted to
The arts.
visuals
Yep.
or the
Yeah.
arts. Yeah, like visuals or the arts
Hmm.
or just something that's like inherently on the web or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, the COVID vaccines are an application of creativity. Like what is you look at the scientific method and you look at design thinking and it's the same
It
steps.
is.
So like even being able to come up with something like a vaccine, like who knew how we were going to come up with vaccines? That's an application of creativity to figure out how you're going to stop a
For
virus.
sure.
Like all of these things are applications of creativity. We may call it something different, but it all sort of boils down to that same central act of being able to take something and use it to solve a problem.
Yeah. I love that, Maurice. That's so good. Um, I'm going to wrap up. So, is there anything you want to plug? Um, and then also tell us where we can find you on the internet.
Yeah, so this is Revision Path's 10th anniversary. We just had our 500th episode back in April. I think by the time this comes out, episode 525 will have aired. So we're still chugging along. As I've, sort of talked about in this video, we do need your financial support to
Hmm.
keep things going. So if you hit us up at revisionpath.donate, I'm sorry, revisionpath.com/donate, you can give a one-time, monthly, or annual donation to help keep it going strong. All of it goes right back into the production of the show. It goes into paying my editor. It goes into the tools that we use to keep the episodes up every year, every week that they go out, keeps the archive active, all that sort of stuff. Of course, you can visit us at revisionpath.com. We are on Instagram at revisionpath. We are on Twitter/X as revisionpath. Um, there's going to be I've been very slow to work on it only because I have other pressing life things that I have to take care of. But like we're slowly launching a membership program.
Okay.
We were on Patreon for several years, and then we got off of Patreon. It's a whole other story. But we are starting to move towards that. Hopefully, I think at this point it might happen in early 2024.
Okay.
So, and that's for two reasons. One, because the current social media landscape is just so
It's a
caustic right
mess.
now.
Yeah.
The platforms that we used to be able to rely on as a publisher are now no longer stable or viable for broadcasting information. So that's one way that we're looking into, kind of moving into a membership platform. But then also just because there's so much stuff, like you all see the podcast, but there's like handwritten notes, there's like all sorts of stuff behind the show that I don't think people get to see, and we want this the subscription platform to be a way that people can take advantage of that. So look for that coming soon. Like keep me accountable because I need to I need to get it done. And then personally, you can find me. My website is mauricecherry.com. You'll find a link there to my Twitter, which is at Maurice Cherry. My Tumblr, which is just blog.mauricecherry.com. And I'm on LinkedIn. Just search for Maurice Cherry. And if you see this face,
It's me.
because there are other Maurice Cherrys out there, But if you see this face in particular, then it's me.
Dope. Thank you so much, Maurice. I really enjoyed this interview. We definitely had a good time. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yep. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Creative Questions. Like, comment, or subscribe to allow us to keep making more episodes. I appreciate you for being here, and I'll see you on the next one.